All right, everyone, welcome on. We have Congressman Chris Stewart on. He's our local congressman here. He's going to kind of give us an update on what is going down in, kind of an update on Ukraine and everything else. And, as much as he can tell us outside of, because I'm sure there's stuff that they kind of have to keep to themselves. But we'll just get right into it. We only got you for a half hour. So, Congressman, jump into it and fill us in.
Well, it's good to be with you guys, and thanks for what you do because you help inform people. And, it's one of the magics of technology today is we get to see things and hear things. We get to know things we wouldn't otherwise. So, everyone wants to talk about Ukraine. It's interesting when we have other hearings, other briefings about other subjects, you can just tell right now there's just not much interest, not much motion. The last 2 or 3 weeks, the whole world's been focused on Ukraine, and it's made other things seem not as important as they did before that. But, one thing I'd say is, as we talk about Ukraine, remember, it's not just Russia and Ukraine. This is going to impact China. It's going to change the dynamic for China and Taiwan. It changes our relationship with NATO. It changes, one of the outcomes of this is you're going to have just a global food potential catastrophe. North Africa, for example, gets almost all of their grain from the Ukraine. And those people are scared to death right now, as you can imagine. So there's an awful lot that ties to this. In the world we live today, everything is so globally interconnected. It's not just one problem there. It's going to impact, again, around the world. But, a couple interesting things I'll tell you that I think maybe just to get us going is our intelligence on this has been just spectacular. And when I say that, I say that as a member of the Intelligence Committee. But, and on that committee, we have access to the most sensitive information in all of the U.S. government. But I say it with this caveat, the intelligence is often wrong. The fact the CIA said it doesn't make it true. And I'm really skeptical of some of our agencies right now, especially after what we saw, in 2016, where some of our government agencies, we found out later, they just simply were wrong. And in some cases, they were deliberately wrong and lying to the American people. But in this case, the intelligence community broadly, they really did get it right. And they told us with real accuracy, hey, Vladimir Putin's going to do this, and about the time that he would. And I've been saying for the last, really since about Christmas, hey, he's going to go into the Ukraine. We need to start preparing the Ukrainian people. We need to start preparing for a resistance, because it was also clear to us, and through some pretty interesting polling and other kind of social analysis we were able to do, it was pretty obvious Ukrainian people were going to fight. And I think it's fascinating that we knew that, but Vladimir Putin didn't. He expected everyone just to roll over. He really thought the Ukrainian people will go, well, if it's Zelensky or if it's Putin, what difference does it make? They're all the same to us. But they weren't. I mean, the resistance we're seeing, the fight that we're seeing with them is just inspiring, I think, for people across the globe. But, sadly, it's just a human catastrophe. And it's hard for me to see an outcome from this. This isn't going to be fixed by the weekend. This is going to be a brutal couple weeks, maybe a couple months for the Ukrainian people.
Yeah. And like you said, intelligence beforehand, I think it would have been a lot easier had we been able to bolster Ukraine prior to the invasion to head off the invasion, because now if we bolster Ukraine, that might make things a little more sticky and complicated as far as two nuclear armed adversaries.
Yeah. Well, Jared, I couldn't agree more. Which is why, as I said, I started saying in the late fall, early winter, to the president, the administration, you've got to arm them now. You've got to give the military and the people there who want to resist this, will essentially become resistance or freedom fighters, you've got to give them the resources now. For two reasons. Number one is just logistically, it's a lot easier then than it is now trying to sneak it across the Polish border and not have it be bombed or attacked. But I think, Jared, more importantly, your point about, maybe it would dissuade Vladimir Putin. Maybe it would make him think twice about this. But I got to tell you, I mean, the indications were there was very little we could do that was going to stop him from going. I think he made the decision. He compelled his commanders to support it. They moved all of this men and equipment. I mean, they moved men as far away as people who were protecting the border in North Korea. So I think he was committed to this, and it was going to be very unlikely we could persuade him not to.
What's his motivation?
Yeah, that's a great question, and really is the heart of the question. And the analysis of his motivation is a little bit difficult, because to know that truly, you have to have real access to Vladimir Putin. You actually got to kind of climb inside his mind to know what he's thinking. But you got to have access to the people and the very, very small group of people that are around him. But I think a lot of it comes down to, what I think you and most of your listeners already know, and that is Vladimir Putin. He's deeply resentful of the fall of the Soviet Union. He's called it the biggest catastrophe of the last century. Not World War II that had 75 or 80 million people die because of that. Not the Holocaust. None of that is the greatest catastrophe to him. It's the fall of the Soviet Union. And he's tried over the last 20 years to kind of rebuild that in different ways, short of war. I mean, he's bought or gained great influence over some prime ministers, foreign ministers, some finance ministers in some of the former Eastern Bloc countries. But that's clearly one of his motives. And I think the other one, and probably the primary one, is his just intense demand that Ukraine and Ukrainian people never have any close associations with the West, never be part of NATO. He can't have Ukrainian, his border and Ukrainian people who are, his neighbors. They can't be a free democracy. It's just that example to the Russian people is just intolerable to him. So I think that's an awful lot of his motive too, is just to eliminate that kind of future, make sure that doesn't develop any further and take that away.
Representative, why do you think that our intelligence was so spot on this time, but it usually is very spotty other times?
Yeah. And that's a great question, Dave. I wish I could answer it. I can just tell you that we had some tools and resources that we just haven't had in some other instances. Look, I don't want to fault the CIA. It's a tough job, doing the analysis that they have. It's a tough job trying to predict the future, right? How many of us would like to have to make a living trying to predict the future and how unpredictable that can be? My only fault of the CIA and the other intelligence community is don't lie to us. Don't actively tell us things that aren't true. And if you don't know, then let's just admit you don't know. But that's the beef I have with Department of Justice or FBI or some of the other government agencies. And by the way, the CDC now, all these government agencies, the American people just say, hey, just tell us the truth. Don't try to manipulate things. Don't try to manipulate us. Just tell us the truth. But the short answer, Dave, is that we just had some really, really pretty exquisite insights that were very helpful to us. The president's made that pretty clear. Beginning about December, he's told the world, hey, we know he's going to do this. So I think, he was pretty definitive in what he said as well.
Yeah, it seems like everyone was warning after the Olympic, it's on.
Yeah.
And earlier you mentioned a lot of other things are going on, and Ukraine seems to be sucking all the air out of the room, like a big omnibus bill just got passed.
Oh my gosh.
And
yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in it. I've heard rumors. I of course, haven't read it because I probably don't have the bandwidth to read through 5,000 pages of anything within years. I'm not that bright, but...
Hey, but see, Jared, if you remember Congress, you'd be so smart. You could read that in 4 hours because that's how much time we had to read it. Yeah,
even Democrat congressmen and senators came out and said, we didn't have time to read this.
Of course not.
And
normally in situations like that, you break the bill up with your staff and you each take a piece and you try to digest it. It's impossible. It's literally impossible for us to know what's in that bill before we had to vote on.
Well, you'd have to have an extreme number of staff. So then the omnibus bill doesn't matter because we're paying for staff that's going to soak up all the money. And so I don't know. I would like to see over the next little while, the Republicans are going to take over the end of this year. I would like to see the Republicans come out and say, write a law that says bills can be no more than 5 pages long. If they're more than 5 pages long, they've got to go into committee and figure out how to break them down. They've got to be done piecemeal.
Well, let me talk about a couple things. One is the omnibus. I'm under a lot of pressure here in D.C. because the two committees I sit on, Intelligence and Appropriations, both of them very powerful committees. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, everyone expects me to vote for the spending bills. But I haven't voted for the omnibus for years. Now, this year, we divided it into two, actually. There was a section for national security. It funded Homeland Security. It funded our Defense Department and some military construction. I actually voted for that. I support that. I mean, and not just, by the way, because of Ukraine. I mean, because we've got a crisis on our southern border. There are a number of things there that we just have to support. And because I was so intensely involved in writing that bill, I did know what was in that part. But then you take most of the federal government and you shove it in this other bill, and I voted against that for a number of reasons. The spending's way, way too high. We didn't know for sure what was in it. A lot of the spending was for things that I just could never support. There were a lot of things in there that I fought for, and I was really glad to get, but I can't support this big, obnoxious omnibus just to protect the few things in there that I think are my priorities. So, to your point now about, how can we avoid that? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. You have leadership in Congress that just doesn't force that. Would previous speakers, the next speaker, who I think is probably going to be Kevin McCarthy, he just simply can't do that. He'll have a rebellion of his own folks if he puts us in a situation where we have to vote for these bills and not know what's in them and just vote for bad bills. But that's the job of the speaker. And I agree with you. We're going to take the House in November. It's a catastrophe for our country, in my opinion, if we don't. Yeah. But we've got to change the way we operate the House. And in fact, I had a long conversation, a long meeting today with the former chairman of the Budget Committee about proposals on how we can do that. And there's some really simple things we can do that I think even Democrats would support. And let me mention one of them just really quickly. Have a 2-year budget. Just have the budget that lasts for the whole Congress. So 2 years ahead the numbers you're talking about. And you give the agencies, not just lurching from continuing resolution to omnibus to CR. You give some consistency to spending as well. And if you want to cut spending, that's the way to do it. Or at least that would help us, is to have a 2-year budget so we can actually look at the numbers and understand what we're voting for.
It would also help if you made it so the agencies couldn't enact laws of their design through bureaucracy like the ATF commonly does. The ATF changes rules back and forth all the time, and we need to have a set standard. And you guys, I mean, if I had my druthers, the ATF would be standing in job lines. But seeing how I can't get that, to have them have a set structure they have to enforce, and they don't go outside of that either direction. You stay on that line.
Yeah. So let me emphasize what you're saying there, and my agreement with you. As a member of Congress, I want Congress to have the power that the Constitution gives us. But too many times, members of Congress want the executive to do that. So here's a good example right now. You got all the progressives. They couldn't build or pass Build Back Better, that just blew up government spending and made the government so much more powerful. Well, they couldn't get it through the Senate. So what do they want? They're telling the president, do it through executive orders. Well, that's insane. I mean, it's nuts for our country. It's bad for our country. And it's bad for members of Congress to say, well, we don't want that power. Mr. President, you do it. You take care of it. And it completely messes up that balance between the executive and the congressional. But let me illustrate your point. This has to go back about 4 years. But going back 2 Congresses, which is the last one we have numbers for, that Congress passed, in a 2-year period, we passed 248 bills. At the same time, the executive, the regulators, the agencies created 11,000 regulations. So, I mean, tell me who's the more powerful, Congress or members of the executive who have the ability to regulate. And whether it's ATF or pick an agency, IRS,
Yeah. OSHA,
Food and Drug, any one of them.
Yeah,
Yep.
environmental. And you know what? And I may not believe those things need to exist, but a lot of people do. But do you want a monarchy or a bureaucratic run like shadow state, or do you want this democratic republic that we have? And right now, everyone when their guy's in control enjoys the monarchy.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we saw that with Republicans sometimes. They wanted them to do things we shouldn't do.
They were fine.
You got to be consistent. If you think there's too much power in the presidency, you've got to be that way when Republicans are in power as well. And I want you to know, I have been consistent on that. But your idea about a monarchy is exactly right. That's the way people feel sometimes. Is that, and here's the important point about that. Every 2 years, I have to come back to people like you, to your listeners, to, the good people in Tooele and wherever they might be in my district. And I have to convince them, hey, I hope you'll send me back to Congress. I hope that I've represented you. And if I have, then I hope you'll vote for me. Show me a regulator who cares about the people in Tooele, right? Or the people in Utah. But there's guys in D.C. who have never, ever been to Utah, will never come to Utah. Yet they're making regulations on public lands, for example, that have enormous importance in Utah. And they don't have to ever defend that to the people. And so if you want to have power to the people, then keep it in Congress. Make guys like me have to come back to the people and say, I'm trying to represent you.
You hear that, everyone? Our congressman is saying, make me earn my money.
Yeah.
I like it. No, that's a good message. It should be in Congress. And it's enveloped over the last probably, 30 years that more executive orders and, maybe even longer than that I would argue under FDR is when you got the bureaucracies, or maybe Wilson, the bureaucracies started maintaining control to change and regulate your life.
But what's the path forward to prevent these bureaucracies from actually becoming our monarch? Is there a path forward, or can we just slow the leak in the Titanic?
Well, I mean, honestly, that's a tough question for me to answer because I'm afraid I'd sound too cynical. And I don't want to be cynical or pessimistic to people, but I don't want to lie to people either. And the truth is, it's a huge challenge. We really did make progress under the former president. We really did begin to, as he said, drain the swamp. The problem is we just ran out of time. If we'd had, and I know some of your listeners maybe like President Trump, maybe some of them don't. But, and I actually had a quite a close relationship with him. I kind of came late to the Trump party. I supported another candidate until he was our nominee. But when I saw what he was doing, I thought, yeah, that's exactly what we need to do. And I became a huge fan because I saw, he was serious when he said, we're going to take on DC. But he started some things too late. For example, I had conversations with him more than once in the White House saying, Mr. President, you got to care about debt. I mean, he's a leveraged businessman, right? He made billions of dollars working in New York City, building these beautiful high-rises, beautiful buildings, but he did that with debt. And so he wasn't uncomfortable with debt, but the federal government doesn't work the same way. And I would talk to him on more than one occasion saying, Mr. President, you got to work with us to reduce our spending, to reduce our debt. He committed to us, to me and to others, I will do that in my second term. We just ran out of time. If you're trying to defang the regulators, Dave, as you're talking about, how do we pull that power back? You've got to have a president who wants to help you do that. We got a pretty good start on it, but we just needed more time.
I think we need to go to the 10th Amendment.
No doubt about it.
There's nothing in the Constitution that lays out we will have an FBI. That should be handled on a state level. And states can work together to solve cross-state crimes. I mean, the only thing I think that should be federally armed as law enforcement should be the marshals that do the dealings with federal crimes. And that goes for all of it. I think we can handle it by states. and we need to allow states to try their shots and maybe even go after other states that maybe upriver pollute them, and deal with it on a state by state basis, and do the 50 petri dish idea.
Yeah. But hey, listen, you are 100% right on that. And I'm not here to sell my books, but I got to mention, if you could, I think you both know that I'm a writer. I've written, a number of New York Times bestsellers. And when I've been in Congress, it's been harder, but I wrote a book. It took me 3 years to write. It just came out a couple of weeks ago. The Final Fight for Freedom is the name of it. But the whole point is what you just say. Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan and others have said, and I agree with this, no foreign country will ever destroy this nation. The only way we die is if we commit national suicide, if we kill ourselves from inside. And that is absolutely true. And I think the only way we stop from doing that right now, because we're in such a divided nation, we're such a divided society, the only way to do that is to allow, as you just said, allow the states to do it how they want. And if you want to live in California and give free medical care to people who are there illegally, if you want to live in California with their different environmental standards, whatever it might be, hey, knock yourself out. Then live in California and pay for that and enjoy that. But to use your 50 petri dishes example, hey, if you want to live in Utah that we're not going to do some of those things, then give people the choice. Utah may do it differently than Maine does. And they may do it differently than South Carolina. Let them decide. And you know what else? Over time, it'll become apparent who's governing right. I mean, it'll be time. Over time, you'll see what states are doing it right or not. It'll be self-evident. But I really think it's the only thing that can save our future is if we get back to that. Because otherwise, if we can invest everything in federal power and the federal government, then we're just, the future is just so frightening for many of us to live on that and to see how much worse it could be. Last thing on that, if I could, and I don't mean to monopolize it, but this is I just feel so strongly about this. A lot of conservatives like me say, well, the liberals or the progressives will never allow that. They don't believe in federalism or state rights. Oh, yes, they do. Here's an example. How many blue states have said, yeah, we're not going to force immigration law. Mm-hmm. We're sanctuary states, sanctuary cities. They'd be willing to say, yeah, we're not going to enforce marijuana laws or drug use laws, federal laws. So when they want to, blue states or progressives will say, no, we're going to ignore federal mandates for the things we want. And all we're saying is as conservatives, well, let us have the same right. If we think there's some things that federal government is absolutely wrong on, then we as a state should be able to have our say in that.
Absolutely.
I completely 100% agree.
Well, not only the say in that, but also the responsibilities of the consequences for those actions. Like if we're paying for California's misdeeds, why wouldn't they want more and more?
Yeah, and that's another thing. California would have to do a trial by fire on what of their programs actually work. Well, a big one right now, the Roe versus Wade argument that up until Putin invaded Ukraine was taking up a lot of space. That should be handled on a state-by-state basis. And then, there'll be some hardships on both sides. And you might have states where the general populace pays for abortions for everyone. And you might have states that are kind of like we were in the 80s and 90s, where safe and quiet. Yeah. And then you might have states like the ones that we've seen marches for where, people outlaw them totally, but you can generate and move to a place where you can pursue your most idea of happiness.
Again, I just couldn't agree more. That's the whole premise of what I wrote about. It's the premise of my experience in DC has taught me, if it's taught me nothing, it's taught me that. The federal government will never answer these questions for us. You have to allow the states to experiment, and for the people, the government that is closest to the people. And again, Roe v. Wade is a great example. Look, I understand that's an emotional issue for some people.
For both sides.
But it's a moral issue. But if it is that kind of thing, then let the states decide. Let the government that is closest to the heart and soul of their population decide. The ones who really understand the heart and soul of the people who live in that state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you might see a situation come out where a state says, we'll even let a county or a city decide. And because it is a contentious issue. I know I stand on one side of it personally, but I oppose forcing my views on other people. I just don't want to be a party to it. I don't want to pay for it, and I don't want to hear about it. Yeah. Just if you leave me alone, I'll let you do whatever you want.
Yeah. And I want to ask one more question on the Ukraine issue.
Yeah.
Recently, Joe Biden has said no to Poland for providing MiGs to Ukraine. Can you give us your analysis on why that was?
Yeah. So, and this is a little bit technical, so bear with me for just a minute if I could, okay? Let me back up and answer a more broad question, that is supporting the no-fly zone. I absolutely oppose it for a number of reasons. People say, well, you just kind of get some airplanes up in the air and they don't let any Russians come in and bomb Ukraine. No, that's not what it is at all. Before we can impose a no-fly zone, we have to take out all of the Russian surface-to-air missiles, all the AAA, all the radar sites, all the command and control. You have killed hundreds of Russian soldiers before you even put the jets in the sky and say, okay, now it's yours. You enforce a no-fly zone.
Then how are we not in an active war if we do something like that?
That's exactly right. That's my point. And then after that, we shoot down Russian fighters, and then these aircraft are taking off and landing and being rearmed and refueled at a base, probably in Germany, maybe in Poland. Well, that base isn't a safe haven. Vladimir Putin's just not going to let them continue to take off and land from a base. He's going to have to eventually, attack that base and try to stop that. So this is like you're not partway at war. You're either at war or you're not. And as soon as we enforce a no-fly zone, we are at war with Russia. And, have we learned nothing from Afghanistan? Mm-hmm. Nothing from some of the real hard lessons that we've learned in the last 20-something years. And that is, if before you find yourself in that position, you better be really, really careful and really thoughtful about if is this the right thing for America. Now, Dave, to your point about the MiGs, I actually would support sending Polish MiGs to the Ukraine. There's not much difference between a MiG and a Javelin. I mean, they're both designed to shoot or destroy armor. It's a little bit of an escalation, but it's not, in my mind, beyond what I think is acceptable. The one thing that I think is a bad idea, and the reason is it just doesn't change anything. There was some talk about, well, given the Polish Air Force American F-16s, well, they can't fly them. I mean, you're giving them a jet. They do have some F-16 pilots, but they've only got a certain number of pilots. You give them a bunch of F-16s, so instead of having 3 F-16s on the ramp, now they have 6. Well, they still only have the same number of pilots. So it was one of those things that I thought, well, it sounds good maybe to some people, but it doesn't change anything. And it draws us closer and closer to being in a position to go into war with Russia. And I just don't think we can do that at this point.
And this would be the first open warfare between two nuclear arms. And what would from Putin's side, he's got to feel like he's up against a wall.
Yeah.
He can't go back. He can't stop and retreat because the sanctions have already damaged his country. He'll be, we'll see a video of him just like Ceausescu. And I would hope he wouldn't, but I could see why he would easily push a red button.
Well, and that's a frightening possibility.
It is.
Now, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But we live in a world where things I thought were impossible, 2 months later, found out it's true, right?
Yeah.
So
here we are.
We want to be really, really careful. And you guys both know. Again, I'm a former Air Force pilot. I come from a family of military. My family is still serving in the military, and I'm not afraid of Vladimir Putin. If we were to go to war with him, we would destroy his in a conventional war. So I don't say this out of fear. I say this out of this reality. We don't want the American people, and we should not compel to find ourselves in a position when we're in a war that's unnecessary, that we didn't have to do it. Now, at some point, he may do something that we have to respond to. I pray he doesn't. At some point, we may have to engage him, but that point is not now. Let us help the Ukrainian people. Let us help their military. Send them the javelins. Send them the ammunition that they've been just incredibly effective at, and help them to win this. But don't involve the American military at this point.
I agree. Well, we've got to cut you loose, Congressman. You've got 1 minute. We've got one comment. We've had a lot of viewers, but only one comment pulling through. And Chris says they only care when it's to their advantage. And I believe he's talking about federalism on the Democrat side.
And I think that works both ways.
No doubt.
And it does work both ways, because you've got to understand both sides have an ideology and goals and things they want to achieve, which federalism is. And I'd say we try federalism, and then we can try cityism. You know?
And countyism. I wish we changed the name, because most people hear federalism and they think federal power, big government. You have to go back to the 1700s, the original name. But I mean, we got to change the name because it confuses people.
Yeah, it does.
It's the states. It's the people that we want to empower.
Yep, states' rights. All right, Congressman, thank you very much. So you're having a meeting tonight, or a telemeeting with some other folks in the district.
Yep.
Go ahead. Let him plug that.
Yeah. Plug that. Plug your book one more time, and then we.
I don't want to plug my book. That's not why I'm here. I'm just, the reason I brought it up because it's what we were talking about.
Hey, your book's a good idea. Your book's an educational. Your book is something that I can tell people. Hey, if you're wondering about how this could work, read this.
Yeah, and if you're wondering what the future, how actually desperate the future could be, read it, because we paint a picture of what could happen to our country if we don't fix some things. So the final fight for freedom, and then, as you guys know, I'm up for re-election, and I'm the only candidate who has never said I won't gather signatures. I'm always going to go to the convention. I'm going to trust people in Utah, people at the convention, and try to get their support. So we're having a phone call tonight with a bunch of the delegates, and give me a chance to talk with them.
Should I join that? Because I'm a delegate now.
Yeah.
Well, you should.
You're a state delegate. You need to be in there. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we'll make sure Dave's in there.
It's good to be with you.
It's good to be with you. Thank you very much. Sir. And, have a good night. Have a safe week. And thanks for your efforts there in Washington.
Hey, it's been fun. Let's do it again.
Anytime.
Okay.
Seriously.
See you guys.
Bye. All right, everyone. That was our congressman. I know sometimes on this show it may come across that I am pro-Putin because I am anti-war. I don't see at this time a winnable situation for us. I'm wondering, one question I wanted to ask him, and I wish I'd have got this out, but we're punching up against the clock. Do we have options on the table that we're working on right now to maybe aid Putin in withdrawing or pulling back, or at least stopping his forward momentum? And maybe those are questions he can't answer, because that might be, sensitive materials. But I'm wondering if there are options. Believe me, I know if we went to war with Russia, I would bet within 3 months we would have conquered Russia. I guarantee it.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
I mean, what do we have to bring to Russians that would want them to for us?
Oh, I don't mean we'd be living there.
What would they want?
I think militarily we would conquer them.
I don't know. I mean, look at us in the Middle East. Okay, we conquered them, and then they kick our butt.
We conquered them, but we tried hanging out. That's what hurt us.
Yeah, and I really don't think that the Russians would have a problem conquering Ukraine if they were just there to do complete military destruction. We might see. We're gonna see. All right, that guy that's a spiritual leader for Putin. I forget his name. Rasputin. We'll just call him that. I've been doing some looking into him and reading into him. And so wait. Putin has a spiritual leader.
Yes, he has a spiritual leader. He's not a spiritual leader. He's a political theorist is what he is. He's kind of like a professor. But he wrote a book, and he wants to he's envisioning like a new political theory rising up in Russia. But Russia is right now getting themselves into a situation where they're going to be just like they were in Afghanistan, or we were in Afghanistan, where they'll be forcing a political theory on a majority of the population, and they're going to have insurgencies and a whole bunch of strife all the time. And it's, I don't know. And that's if no one else gets involved. Other countries might get involved. And then let's say Poland goes in to defend Ukraine, and then Poland's attacked by Russia over Ukraine. Does that then
bring NATO into it?
Does that then schedule the Article 5? Does that trigger that?
But if there's a reason why Joe Biden did not give permission for the MiGs.
It's because that'd be an act of open war between.
Well, think about this though. How many MiGs did the Russians give to the North Koreans, the Vietnamese, when we were at war with them? It wasn't a big deal for them to give them MiGs.
Sure, and
so if we gave MiGs now, it wouldn't be any different than historically what happened on the opposite polar end of our historical events.
Could be, but what if Putin reacts erratically that drives us into another world war?
Has he reacted erratically yet?
I don't know. I honestly, I consider the invasion of Ukraine erratic.
So here's this thought process. When he took over Crimea, there wasn't a drop of blood spilled.
Well, that was a little different. A lot of Crimea, first of all, he had what? Like a couple Navy bases there already. So all he had to do was open the gates, and he was flooded with Marines and Navy and whatever army was stationed around those bases.
But
so
it was still so successful that you'd think in your mind.
But they already dominated. And then he had battleships that were parked at their shore.
Mm-hmm.
They were parked before, Ukraine and him argued. They were already there. He didn't. It's not like he had to really incur that much. I mean, it was an incursion, but
for him, it looked like a fantastic success.
Well, it really was, but that's because one, he had already occupied Crimea for the last 40 years. So it was like an occupation where somebody else somewhere else said, "Hey, that's ours. You need to leave." And he's like, "I'm already here." So he kind of did the possession is 9/10 of the law argument.
But to him, it looked like a victory.
Well, and to everyone around the world, I'll bet it bolstered people to his side. And I mean, let's look at what this future argument has done. We've got right now things that are going on, and we didn't get into it with the good congressman. I understand he's pinched for time, but China and OPEC are talking, or China and Saudi Arabia are talking about the UAE. So that's all of them are talking about selling oil to China for the yuan. And what would that do to the dollar?
I think it would give it some healthy competition. You know what? I don't think competition's bad, Jared.
Not at all. But
I think it's actually healthy to have competition.
Right now, our dollar is weak because it hasn't had any competition.
I think that's a great analysis.
Our dollar's in a wheelchair. It has a couple of casts on. Maybe it even had an amputation from diabetes.
I mean, why not print more dollars if everyone has to use dollars because they have to?
Yeah.
If they didn't have to, then they'd have to use do they want to use dollars?
I would love to see Bretton Woods go away. I would love to see an open market and not have the dollar be the backer. And at the time, it kind of made sense because all the nations and all the global trade going on meant that gold really wasn't a realistic, solid backer for the currency just because of how spread out it was. But I don't know. I don't know. It's but I don't think we would I don't. Yeah. Chris says, why do we have money being spent on foreign relief when Americans are hurting? It's another good question. Americans are hurting. Again, that goes back to states' rights. If we had all the money, imagine under federalism, if you never paid federal taxes, if all your taxes was dealt with on the state level, then states like Nevada, you may not have taxes at all because they absorb that through the gambling commission.
States like California would be,
And states like
even
California, well, no, states like California would probably change. And I would bet within 2 years they would figure that out. That they
if
can't
they
maintain
didn't change. I think
if they didn't change, they would have, hey, our one resident paid his tax this year, because and it'd be one resident and homeless people,
a lot of homeless people,
and that's all it would
there
look
already
like.
are. Yeah,
Maybe
maybe some dumpster houses.
Dude,
I'm telling you, it's a good idea.
Man, that is a fantastic idea. Okay, Chris also says only way 13 months is to kill civilians. I don't know. Russia has an economy that is on par with Mexico. And that's how you have to look at it. They have a military, while tough, is on par with, if I was to guess, a country. I mean, their military's less than France. I honestly, I think we would roll over them. We just have so much more capability.
When you say less than France, you're talking about like boots?
Their military capabilities. That's just not just boots, but that's technology, equipment, maintenance of equipment, ammunition, all that other stuff. And granted, even though I'm sure Russia has been doing a buildup in anticipation for this for quite a while, they've probably stockpiled a lot of stuff. But I mean,
sure.
I'm pretty sure we would take that place over awful fast. Well, we'd eliminate the place. So I don't want to take it over. We've seen that doesn't work.
Right. I really don't think you can take over a country like Russia without the population wanting you to help them. And
that's true. We couldn't take over Afghanistan or Iraq.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a country that we could take over that really would want us? Does anybody, even people with the exact same ideals as us, would probably, like say England, unless, I don't know, the Queen started beheading children, they wouldn't want us going over there and militarily overthrowing their government. I don't think anyone would. Would we want it? I mean, is there any country that we would be satisfied, even with the craziness that we see go on sometimes? Is there any nation we'd be comfortable with coming over here? I mean, isn't that the Alex Jones thread all the time? Is that there's going to be powder blue hats wandering our streets? Even if it's for good, even, say our power system went down, what part of the population, two questions. What part of the population would want them to come over to relieve that? And how long would it take to reach an amount of that population? Because I imagine if we went without power for, I don't know, like a year or towards the end of winter, people would be like, hell yeah, I don't care whoever you can get over here to help. But you do it in the summer, people won't want them there because they're not us. It's a different language, different, whatever.
Cultures have to mix organically in order to be peacefully integrated. Like, you can't just all of a sudden say, oh, I'm the government, I'm going to drop 1,000 Somalis in Tooele.
Well, not just that. Let's say we do extreme federalism. Would we want Colorado taking over Utah or even Idaho, Nevada? Do you think that would go over well? So I don't think anything. Would we want Grantsville City governorship or the mayor and their council taking over Tooele? You see what I'm saying?
Right. There's a pride issue unless there's like some serious depravity.
It's a pride. It's There's a lot. Again, like the congressman said, the smaller, the closer the government, the better. You know,
And you know what? I think Putin was assuming that because the Ukrainian people and Russian people are so close and similar, that maybe they'll be happy to throw off the yoke of their current government and embrace a new one that maybe is more financially stable.
it might be.
That could be something that's in his mind. And you want to know, I bet you it is.
Is he trying to take over Western Ukraine as well? That's another question. Is he trying to push all the way west, all the way to the border?
Well, they're attacking the bases on the Polish border, right? So, I mean...
Okay, they're attacking bases, but is he trying to actually occupy that? They're probably attacking the bases because that's where they're probably feeling, long-range pressure.
Well, I know there's some videos about the occupation in like Kharkova or whatever that city is that they did take over.
I have no clue where that is.
So yeah, that's in southern Ukraine area.
Is it beyond that river, or which side of that river?
I think it's one of the coastal cities, right? But either way, it has been conquered by Russia. They are in there, and they are. I mean, it looks like an occupation zone of some really hostile occupiers.
Is it so? It's on the coastal. Is it on the west side of that river that cuts down through Kiev to Odessa, or on the east side? I think that's the.
Well, currently they're sieging Odessa. That's the next one.
Now Odessa's actually west of that river, but sorry everyone, I don't have the name of the river off the top of my head, but in a way that makes sense because supplies would be waterborne. That'd be the ideal way to ship in multiple tons. So maybe they're trying to just take over everything that's on the coast there. But I don't know. I don't know. And if Russia, what's the options? What options do we have? But we also have to think. We have to think about this strategically. What options do Putin have?
And let's think about this though. Is it really to our disadvantage if there's a war in eastern Ukraine between Ukraine and Russia? Is it our disadvantage? Or is it an advantage to us?
Okay. That's a tough one. We have made promises to Ukraine when we coaxed them out of keeping their nuclear armaments. We made promises to them that we would be their defense. The downside with falling back on that is now, say, we go to make promises to a place like North Korea, or, any other nuclear, would they trust us to make a promise like that?
No, I don't think they would. Not anymore.
But even before, they probably wouldn't. But then again, we wouldn't have a leg to stand on. So that's another complicated part. So, yeah, it's complicated on both sides.
But think of the construction contracts that are going to have to be pushed into Eastern Europe now. Think of all the
might
supplies
kickstart their economy.
Well, it's going to kickstart someone's economy.
We need to go into
Is it going to kickstart ours? I don't know because we don't really produce anything.
Yeah.
But we do have a lot of engineers. We have a lot of NATO has some need of kickstarting their economy.
Yeah, I don't know. I really wish, I still fall back on, I would like to see us turn our economy into not one that goes pop. I would like to see us turn our economy. I mean, everyone talks about the green economy. You know what? If Boeing started building cars and throwing technology into cars, I mean, let's put out a competition to everyone. I mean, could we get 100 miles per gallon car? Or could we figure out maybe train some mechanics for Teslas so that Teslas last more than 10 years? Little things like that.
Or don't catch on fire.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't know. If anyone's got ideas, throw them up there. But I don't. I was happy to hear that Congressman Stewart understood that we don't want to go to war.
Yeah, I hope his book is in audio because then I will definitely check it out.
Yeah, me too.
I've actually listened to a few of his books on audio
Yeah.
about his like, spiritual beliefs, and he's formed a story about, what if the Mormon religion is the way it is, and he has characters going through the setup of how that religion would work in a modern day society, and it's between spirits and demons, and it was really interesting. I actually really enjoyed it. I'm not a religious person, but I find the theory that the Mormon religion offers it actually makes for some really cool storytelling.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I am not religious either, but I like reading religious history because I think it's of all the best snapshot of the kind of common people of that time. Tells you what was most important to them. But anyways, you guys, I don't know. I was dreading this week that we were going to hear our congressman saying we need to go to war, and
you didn't hear that.
Man, I come away feeling so good. One, every time we go to war, we lose freedom. Every time. I mean, next time you're at the airport and that guy in that blue shirt with the piping on his lapel is rubbing the back of his hands up against your nether regions. Just remember, we lost that going to war. Do you remember when you first joined the Air Force going to the airport?
It wasn't even a declared war.
Not yet, and no.
Oh, it was like an executive action.
We haven't had a declared war in our last declared war by Congress was World War II. So everyone drink that in, smell it. It's been a minute. It's been a matter of fact, over the next 20 years, the last people to be alive since the last declared war, when we've been involved in 8 or 9 wars after that, probably more than that, will not be here anymore. And we need to wrestle that back. And I like the idea of congressmen wrestling back the power to make laws. The executive branch's job is to execute what Congress and the Senate say to execute. And the job of the judiciary is to restrain Congress and the Senate if they ever get out of hand.
And we were talking about having a monarchy, but the weakness of a monarchy is the monarchs themselves. We won't have that. We'll have these giant bureaucrats, these unknown people.
Well,
and we won't even be able to point fingers at them.
You just said the weakness of the monarchy we won't have while Biden is in office, because we'll still have that weakness, because he is.
Well, Biden isn't the bureaucracy system.
And that is true. He's protected by that, but he could still come out and do something radical that could change us. Between the hours of probably 9 a.m. to probably 4 p.m., when he's got some cognitive abilities, he could do something radical that could change us.
All right, if you say so.
No, I'm sure he could.
I mean, the word "if" is the definition of that statement.
And maybe the bureaucracy actually stands in the way of him being able to do that.
I'm sure it would.
I think, what's the law that was put in under Nixon, the Executive Powers Act, where they have 48 hours for any invasion? He can order the Marines and the QRF of the nation in for 48 hours. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a power that's still there.
So he could order the Marines into the FBI and CIA and take away those bureaucracies. And
I changed my mind. I want Biden to have Mr. Biden, if you could. The ATF and the IRS are enemies of the state, and that's still a tough call. Ever since we talked to Tim, who would I eliminate first? ATF or IRS? My mind says IRS, but my heart says ATF. Says it hard. And if you're an ATF officer out there, and you don't like hearing this, I'm sorry. You sold your soul. You could have went and worked for you could have been an enforcer for a pimp and had more character and honesty in your job. You could have.
They're just doing their job, Jared. They're
just doing their job.
Just doing their job.
That's the way it goes. Just doing my job. Who seeks to work for that? You know, an organization that, 1 week you're legal and then a bureaucracy comes out and the next week you're a felon. Yeah. Anyways,
yeah.
Thanks for joining us. I did want to bring up, I had something I wanted to bring up before we kick this off, but
well, we can announce our show next Wednesday.
Yeah, we got a show next Wednesday. We're chatting with, what's the guy's name?
Michael Brown.
Michael Brown. He's running for District 3. Is that
No,
right?
he's not running for anything.
Oh no, Michael.
In fact, he was run out of a meeting because he was wearing some stickers.
Michael Brown. Okay, they were voting on the HB 60. That was the anti-vax passport, and he was wearing a sticker on his chest, and he got handcuffed and arrested for it. But join us then. He's going to lay the story on us. We're excited to talk with him. Who is it we have tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Bad with names, but we've got the guy running for District 3 tomorrow at 10 a.m. Right?
Well, he's running for state senate.
Yeah, state senate.
He is so he's in the state local area.
Yeah.
He's not in the Tooele area.
Yeah, he's outside of our region. He's down south, but
he's a good guy. We know him personally, and we wanted to give him some airtime to lay out his case and tell the public why they should vote for him, because he'd be an excellent addition to our state bureaucracy.
And seriously, if we go to the 10th Amendment, that's what counts as your state bureaucracy. How do they hold them accountable? And honestly, I think the state of Utah needs to change it so that the governors don't have as much power as they have, because right now governors are extremely powerful. They can make a lot of things happen, so they need to do something about that. But join us tomorrow at 10. Next Wednesday, it's at 5:30. Is that right?
6 o'clock.
At 6 o'clock. We're
That'll be
chatting
Michael
with them.
Brown. Yep.
Michael Brown. And but yeah, and upcoming shows.
We'll figure it out. I still have to make advertisements, but we're getting there.
We've got a handful of people running coming on, and we're ramping up to the election season. So everyone running, you're going to see them show up, be a part of it, so you can get to know everyone.
And feel free to make requests if there's somebody you want to see, somebody you want to hear from. Let us know, because otherwise we're just doing our own echo chamber.
We're just a couple of apes that we're hairless apes. Well, Dave's a hairless ape, but if there's someone you want to hear from, and we don't care what district, where they're running, we'll reach out to them and try to get them on, because we want to, of course, and I'm big on the national or the local and state elections. I really want to push that, and I want to see my dream come to fruition where local and state elections receive a majority of votes over national elections. And that's not a knock against our congressman. I think what that would do is that would send a message to the president that, hey, I need to earn them a little more, and things like that. But anyways, everyone have a good night.
And one last thing though.
Yeah.
I am the T22 state delegate. So if you're in the T22 district for Tooele and you want to have some input on who I vote for or why I vote for them,
His number is 555.
Yeah.
He likes being called after
No,
10:30 p.m.
Listen not to him. But definitely throw some comments into the show or reach out. Let me know. I'd be more than happy to talk to you, because that is the job.
It'd be cool to set up like a delegate meetup. Anyone who's got interest in our T22, we have a day where they meet up, and we can do it on Zoom or at a park, and they can field their interest to you, field their questions and conversation.
Definitely.
Set something up. But anyways, everyone, thanks for joining us. didn't have as many comments as I thought we'd had. We had quite a few listeners, but not as many comments. But Chris, thanks for jumping on there. Good comments. A lot of thought-provoking stuff. And everyone, if you get the chance, reach out to your congressman. Chris Stewart's been on the show twice now. He's he's far away, but he's a reachable guy, and he is a very good and intelligent dude. And I'm glad that he is our congressman at this time, for sure. Mm-hmm. I think we, especially after talking to him tonight, just he had a good message. We're
Put you at ease.
not going to war. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everyone, and we will see you
Tomorrow morning
at 10 a.m.